we're good to go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this additional Board of Directors meeting for January 21st, 2022 at 4:12 p.m. Ms. Verakin, the role and mission of the board.
Role of the board: we are entrusted to care for the current school and stay focused on the vision for the future school. No trust, no unity, no progress. Mission: Clover Garden School will foster community, generate enthusiasm, challenge students academically, and produce successful citizens.
Thank you. Has everyone had an opportunity to review our agenda for this afternoon? Do I have an emotion to approve today's agenda? Mr. Huffines, do I have a second? Miss Murrell, are you seconding? Okay, all in favor of approving today's agenda?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Mr. Hackney?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Verakin, would you please present the information in regards to COVID and reopening updates?
Yes, ma'am. The document that we guys sent you was drafted up from the Health and Wellness Committee. I want to say thank you to Ms. Cox, who's sitting in with us today on our Board of Directors meeting as our COVID coordinator, and as well as Dr. Vaughn, who sits in on our Health and Wellness Committee, who is an epidemiologist. So we greatly appreciate both of these ladies and for adding input today. So what we would like to do, we are kind of, again, we feel like we've been saying this for a long time, but we are definitely in an unprecedented time. Numbers are very high for our community, very high for the state of North Carolina, the highest that we've had so far. So we're in a situation that is unfortunate to be in, that we had hoped we wouldn't be in 2 years later, but we are kind of going back to a situation now where numbers are dangerous, basically, and the safety of our kids is in danger. And so our Health and Wellness Committee has been meeting to review data and to kind of look at what would be in the best interest for our kids. So the purpose of today's special meeting is to ask, the Health and Wellness Committee has asked for a recommendation that we move to temporary remote learning for next week, the week of the 24th. I want to make sure I'm accurate here, through the 28th, as a temporary alternative to help us continue mitigating and the spread of COVID-19, trying to protect the exposure. Our data kind of speaks for itself. We have a record-breaking number of positive cases this week, and we're not even in school. So thank you, though, to those families that have been honest and have reported their kids that have tested positive, because they're not even in the building right now, and the community spread is just so rampant. So again, thank you to those that have been honest and have let us know what was going on. So we would like to move to remote learning temporarily just next week for our middle school and high school students. They are the best prepared to transition to remote learning for a temporary amount of time. All of their materials are in Canvas, so they are familiar with that system. They use that program and that platform every day at school. It will be the least amount of transition to their normal school day, their expectations, but it would also give us the opportunity, if we have middle school and high school remote, and we are able to bring in K-5 into the building, we can continue separating even the kids that are in the building and be able to mitigate a little better. Social distancing, less interaction with other kids, those kind of things. And the reason that we're asking for K-5 to be on campus next week is because they do not have access to technology at this point in time. The school has purchased technology for every K-5 student, but as everything else, it was on back order, and we just got that prior to Christmas. So those computers and things like that are not ready for our K-5 kids yet. So So we would, have an alternative there. We can have them stay remote as well, but we just felt like it would be in the best interest for those age children to be on campus, because they need the most support when it comes to teacher interaction and things like that. So they are, that's our request. Our recommendation from the Health and Wellness is that, like, for a temporary amount of time, nothing that would be permanent, but that our K-5 just for next week until we get over what we consider a peak. We are about 2 to 3 weeks behind, I think, that the peak hitting North Carolina. And Dr. Vaughn, you're welcome to speak to that if you'd like. But it would be nice to put some additional measures in place so that we aren't sending home even more children next week. Last week, when we weren't closed, last week when we were on campus, it was pretty brutal. The kids were coming and going constantly because of the numbers and how high the percentage of spread is in the community. And our Miss Cox, who's our COVID coordinator, and our nurses assistant, I mean, they were working around the clock to try to get the kids in and out of there as quick as we could. But it's still, it was just a dangerous situation. We had a lot of kids in middle school and high school. I'll say a lot. I don't want to say a lot. We had a few children actually call home to go home, because they felt like they were in fear of their own safety, from being around folks that were testing positive for COVID, because it was going so quickly. We have also had to report our first cluster that we have not had in 2 years. We had to report a cluster. It happened within our athletics teams. And so we've got some mitigations in place that you saw in the document for what we're going to do with athletics. But we are fearful that that is going to continue right now while we're in the midst of the highest point of this spread of transmission. So those are just some of the points. I know we outlined a lot of things to you. On a great note, on a positive note, our numbers did decrease as of now currently at 419, as in people that are on active quarantine. So our numbers have dropped significantly from last week, but we also take into account that folks are not in the building. So if they're not reporting, they're not in the building for us to see the signs and symptoms to be able to say, hey, hang on a minute, let's test, or hey, you need to go home. We think that may occur frequently next week. So these numbers are based on honest families that have been just reporting signs and symptoms to Ms. Cox. So, but that's been a great decrease, especially when it comes to our staff quarantine percentage as of right now. So that has increased significantly, has improved significantly. So those numbers are great. I will tell you that just since me sending this document to you last night, Ms. Cox, you may want to speak to this, but I know the one that I marked that was a significant change was the middle school quarantine percentage has now increased from 9% to 11%. And so the others have gone up, slightly, but not enough to change the value. So, but middle school is now sitting at 11%. So we still have a couple days left of the week, the weekend, and we'll kind of see what those numbers look like. But overall, however you guys decide to vote today, we will adjust. We are definitely going to put some significant measures in place and mitigations the best that we can, because this variant that we have right now is so transmissible that it's been tough to try to manage. So we're doing the best that we can, but we're going to additionally, add some more mitigations in place. And then the last document that you'll see, and Dr. Vaughn would probably be happy to speak to this, is a summary of the current metrics. So you can see the current metrics for North Carolina that's increased just since our committee met last week, has already increased to 30.6%. And if you look at the metrics compared to last week when we pulled these, that there's been a significant increase in transmission for the counties we serve. So, we try to focus on those 3 major counties.
And I can add, a few things in addition to what you see in front of you, just kind of for comparison. In terms of where North Carolina is nationally right now, in terms of case rate, we're 11th in the country. So we're behind, the New England states that have kind of gone through their peak and are now on the decrease. And so we're one of the higher case rates in the country. And then if you look at just within the 100 counties in North Carolina, Alamance County is 14th out of the 100 in terms of case rate. So significant transmission within Alamance County. Our other two primary counties, Caswell and Guilford, are further down that list. And this percent positivity rate for the state is now 34.3%. And that is something that is higher than we've ever seen. You know, I remember when we were worried about being over 10%, and now we're looking at 34.3, and Alamance is 35.6, Caswell 36.4, and Guilford 29.4. So these are really significant numbers. And this is something that we can't stop as a school. These are numbers that are going to happen within our community. And so our goal is to try to figure out how to mitigate the impact on learning within the school and allowing the kids to continue to learn. So happy to answer any questions that you might have about the statistics or what's going on from a national or state perspective.
Are there any questions for Dr. Vaughn at this time? Mr. Hackney, do you have a question for Dr. Vaughn?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Vaughn. And Ms. Verakin, the other item that we want to vote on and make sure we walk through and discuss is the athletics, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We kind of added that to our recommendations. We don't want to shut everything down, but knowing that we need to put some additional mitigations in place. You know, clusters can form anywhere, but in this specific case was athletics. And so we want to change the face mask requirement for our basketball players. This could be temporary. I'd love to revisit this in February at our next board meeting. But until we get over, you know, the peak and the wave, basically, and kind of think about it in the way that we've looked at the data before, you know, those increases where holidays were, you know, the data that Ms. Cox shared a couple of weeks ago. So once we get over that peak, we could kind of dial back a little bit, but yes, Coach Moyer was very much in support of adding some additional things there with the athletics teams. We want to separate the kids, of course, on buses, let them come in next week for practice, but of course, making them wear their face masks anytime they're in the building. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association had removed that requirement where the 10 players on the court could take their masks off. We would like to, I guess, reinstate that order. We want them to wear their masks right now in order to try to keep them safe as well. So whether they're on the bus, whether they're at practice, whether they're at games for the next couple of weeks, even in active play, we want to make sure that they are wearing their face masks.
Any concerns or questions regarding those recommendations for the athletics?
And I'm not sure, Ms. June, if you wanted me to add this part or not, but we did try to find a compromise, you know, instead of having the kids, because just truth and transparency, Ms. Cox, I think it's okay for me to say that there was a situation with positive cases on a bus route. So not a bus route, but a bus going to a game. So very fearful of putting kids on a bus at this moment, to be quite honest with you. So our compromise with Coach was, instead of making parents drive their kids to ball games this week, we're going to separate the kids on different buses, make sure, you know, windows are cracked, those kind of things, that they're wearing their face mask. But since we also have the availability of testing, if the kids want and desire to ride the bus, then they're going to need to do a rapid test prior to being allowed to get on the bus. So the alternative would be, if there are parents that don't want their kids tested, then they would have to, you know, take their children to the ball game themselves. But in order to be able to ride the school transportation to the ball game, that would be the requirement that we would have in place for those athletes.
How many athletic functions do we have the week of January 24th through the 28th?
There are 3 ball games, and Ms. Cox, quote me on this, but I believe they're all away games.
So there's none on campus, correct?
with this recommendation that coach had, we would not have middle school on campus at all next week for practices or games or JV. So we would have just the varsity teams.
May I ask Dr. Vaughn a question, please?
Absolutely.
Dr. Vaughn, I fully believe in, taking the kids' safety and the whole environment, the teachers, the whole 9 yards, and that's of utmost importance to me. And I'm a mask wearer myself, and have no problem with wearing masks. My question is this, or my comment, I guess, is when I see us at school doing these things, right? Trying to wear a mask properly, trying to keep everybody protected and all that. Yet I see these same people out in the community. And when your community is not doing the same thing that we're trying to do as a school, if you're protected from, 8 to 3, but, from 3 to 8, you're not protected. We can do all the right things and our numbers still go up. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean we don't need to do the right things. I mean, I'm in full support of that. But when your community doesn't necessarily support the same ideas, or even people within our school, when they have to wear masks, they do, but then otherwise they don't. Who's to say where you're getting the virus from, so to speak? We're the way we talk, it makes it sound like it's all being spread at school, but that's obviously not the case, because it's being spread in all these other places as well. So when kind of across the board, everybody's not adopting the same type of precautions, how does really what we do have any impact on the safety of our kids? And I don't mean that as a facetious question. I mean, I really mean, it's kind of like over here we're protected, but everywhere else we're not.
You make a very good point, and this is driven by community transmission and very much largely driven by behavior outside of the school. We absolutely can't do anything to change that. We're kind of suffering the consequences of that, unfortunately. And so I feel like as a school, we can only do so much to protect our population. We may not be able, we're not going to stop this tidal wave. This virus is a tidal wave, but anything that we do at this point is really to try to get through the next couple of weeks where things don't feel so disruptive and everyone's kind of grasping at straws of what to do if we have constantly substitutes in, that maybe can't handle keeping up with lesson plans, or if students are struggling because there's so many at home that they can't get the same attention as the students in the class. It's just a lot of disruption. And I feel like if we could all just take a breath and find a way to kind of give everyone the same opportunity to learn in the same way. So, hopefully if everyone is remote learning, we're not dealing with, a bunch of kids who are out in quarantine trying to figure out how to do their piece. And then there's the kids in class. So it's not just about keeping them safe from COVID, because there's still a risk outside of the classroom. It's also trying to provide some sort of stable learning environment during the worst part of this, which is, the next couple of weeks. This is going to be the most disruptive period for our school. And I think it creates a lot of stress for students and a lot of stress for staff. And if people are stressed also about potentially getting exposed at school, that's another level of stress. So there's two sides to this, is trying to reduce transmission in school, which I don't know that really is the issue, because we are masking all the time. We are trying to be really rigid about that. But it's still the infectious dose for Omicron versus previous variants is much lower. And so, if there is a student in school and hanging around for many hours with other students, there is certainly a risk of transmission within the school. And as we've seen, athletics is a higher risk of that as well. So I think we're seeing this as, what can we do just for the time being for this period, because of how severe these case numbers are right now. Just since last week, the numbers have increased by 100% in almost all of our main counties. And it's just, you know, the load that puts on the school to try to manage that, I think is just really difficult. And so this is our idea of how to try to mitigate that a little bit from both a learning and a health and safety perspective. But I completely hear you. And it is hard because we can't change anything about what's happening in the community. And even if these students are remote learning, they might still be socializing and hanging out together. And there's not a lot we can do about that. But as a school, I think trying to keep people safe and consistent in how they're learning to try to get through this is probably the best thing we can do.
Thank you.
Any other questions or clarifications for Ms. Cox or Dr. Vaughn? Any further discussion? Everyone clear on the recommendations? And again, this is just for the week of January 24th through the 28th. All of you need to be aware that, again, per our communication as well, we are going to have to go week by week. So we're going to have to look at numbers. We're going to have to be engaged with Ms. Verakin and the Health and Wellness Committee. We may have to have a weekly Board of Directors meeting to ensure that we're looking at our numbers, looking at the safety of our staff and students, and what it means week over week until we get over this peak.
Ms. June, I did want to mention too, we put this in the document, but there's been some updated guidance too from the CDC in regards to effective mask wearing and material that the masks are made out of. And so I'm going to send some updated guidance this weekend on those face masks. It was talking a little bit to the cloth masks, and if it's just one layer, how ineffective those are at preventing the spread of the virus. And we have a lot of kids and a lot of faculty members that wear cloth masks and/or the gaiters, those kind of things. And so we're getting some evidence back now that those are not very effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19. So at this point, we're kind of looking for guidance on that. I think that I want to go at it from the aspect of just sharing that information with our families this weekend to kind of let them know about the information, and then potentially, mandating that we're not able to wear those type of masks, that the masks that they wear have to follow, the requirements, that are 3-layered and things like that. So again, that was another piece to this that we wanted to look at.
Okay, and what is our supply of appropriate masks or appropriate material masks? Ms. Cox, I think Ms. Verakin just was or dropped or had to drop video. Can you answer that question? In case we do have families that show up on campus and just have the cloth, and we've mandated appropriate material masks.
Yes, ma'am. We currently have plenty in stock. This is something that we've been doing on a daily basis. They are available as soon as they walk through the door. So this is something that we have been doing when the students don't have a mask. So we have got plenty of supplies for those type of things.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Again, today we just need to vote on 2 things, and this is for the week of January 24th through 28th. We will have 2 voted items. So I just need to know before we go through those votes. After that, we'll be closing out the meeting. So just need to know if there's any further discussion, questions that you want to have prior to going into those votes.
Got one. So before we get to a vote, so if we choose as a board to move forward with this temporary remote learning, I mean, I understand we'll have to look at this as a week by week basis, but what kind of targets, what kind of goals are we looking at to say that we're going to come out of remote learning? What kind of metrics, what kind of numbers are we looking for? We have any idea?
So, Mr. Huffines, what we're looking for and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Verakin, is that, you know, when we look at this again and look at our numbers next Thursday, if they have come down and we're back down below where we were last week, or the same at least, we are ready to go back into full school. We'll go back to normal. It won't be remote learning. You won't have the additional restrictions, et cetera. So that's what we're looking for, is making sure we're seeing a reduction. We're seeing where we're being effective by the social distancing, fewer people on campus, and making sure that our numbers are going to come back down.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
our hope is that next Thursday, the numbers are going to be down due to, you know, this week, you know, kids not being on campus and staff not being on campus due to the weather, et cetera. Next week, doing the mitigations as planned in the recommendations, that by the end of next week, we'll have seen a reduction enough to go back to full on-campus activity. Does that make sense? Is that clear for everyone? But if we see the numbers are continuing to go up, if we're seeing that we're not having any improvement in infection, or if another cluster comes to light, et cetera, then we'll have to look on voting for the next week. That's why we want to take it week by week. Because by any means, I don't want to sit here and have a vote that we have remote learning for the next 3 weeks. I don't want to see us do that.
Yeah, and let me, just one comment, and this is the fear that I have. If we step into this remote learning, it is going to be tough for us to return to a regular school schedule. You know, once you start regressing, it's hard to move forward. And we, as a school, have moved forward so much in this COVID. And I understand the concerns about the COVID, and it's no way that we can mitigate the risk of community spread, because again, you know, it's everywhere. So again, my biggest fear, if we go to remote learning, it is going to be so tough for us to come out of that.
Miss June, I don't mind speaking on behalf of the school, if that's all right. So I will tell you, even health and wellness, that consists of parents and teachers that also sit in on that committee. And remote learning is not our first choice. I can tell you that. All of us have the same concerns with remote learning. The best day ever was when we were able to have our kids back in the building. So, Mr. Hackney, we too share the same concern that you do, but on our end, I will say that, you know, it when we say temporary, you know, everybody's like, well, they've been saying temporary for a long time. COVID was supposed to be temporary, but we know the value of having those kids on campus. And so for us, you know, that is something that we would not even be contemplating remote learning if we didn't feel it was absolutely necessary. And the beautiful thing is that even the state doesn't allow for you to take but so long with COVID absences and things like that. So, you know, we have to justify, you know, being closed. You're not closed, but we have to justify going to remote learning. And so as soon as the numbers get better or they improve, then boom, you're back into in person. So even there's not a, I don't want to say there's not ever, because you never know this just day and age, and things keep changing every day. But there's a very slim chance that there would be a permanent remote learning option this year. So we are looking at, like I said, the next 2 weeks are the biggest, I think. Dr. Vaughn, just some of the information that we spoke about, you know, those 2 to 3 weeks that we're kind of, you know, trying to get over this peak. That's why we're trying to be proactive by doing a little stint, like boom, okay, we're going to do 5 days, that's it, like let's just see how that helps. And then, you know, you never know what's going to happen. It may be a thing where we have to call an emergency board meeting because something skyrocketed over the weekend, and you know, we might have to go a few days remote, you know, at some point between now and in May. I can't predict that part, but I did want you to know that as a school and as a committee, we are absolutely in favor of in-person learning, and I respect your fear on being stuck in remote learning and not being able to get out. Sorry, Dr. Ball.
Yeah, I'd be happy to also say, as a parent, I fully do not want my kids to be doing remote learning. I want them in school. And I agree with Ms. Reagan. This was not an easy thing for us to even raise as a group. But we know that this wave it's going to be on the downslide soon. And so this is really a stopgap to just get us through the worst of this, and try to minimize disruption as much as we can, because we've seen the turnaround happen other places. We're not that far behind. But with these % positive rates, I'm sure you can all feel it as well around you, how disruptive it is to everyone's lives. And so I definitely see this as very temporary, just to get us through the next couple of weeks, hopefully just the next week, because as the community numbers come down, our numbers will come down as well. We've always seen that reflect very much. But so I would not expect to see our school experience numbers that are increasing while the community transmission comes down. I think that's exceedingly unlikely unless there's a cluster or a particular outbreak, which we generally don't see because of good compliance with masking and our rules. So, yep, just my thoughts.
And this is another concern of mine. As a parent of a senior in high school, I can say that we have a very short window to make a connection with students getting ready to graduate, rising seniors, students that's going to be entering the workforce. We have a very small window to make an impact, and every day that they're not in a classroom is we're losing that connection.
Thank you, Mr. Hackney. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, Ms. June. I wanted clarification as to why high school but not can continue to play but not middle school or JV.
Ms. Cox, can I share? I will try to do this as best I can. So the cluster that was found was not within our varsity sports, if that answers the question without sharing too much confidential information. And Ms. Cox, Ms. Vaughn, Dr. Vaughn, if y'all anything to add to that Coach spoke about, feel free to.
I agree, and just to keep in mind for the board members is that ones that we are seeing quarantine from last week are showing a lot more of positive rates this week, and it is hitting certain grade levels more than others.
I speak as a parent and also a board member as well. My son Ethan plays on the middle school basketball team, and I know y'all can't speak to it, but I will. There's been many people on the team sick. Ethan's been home for 10 days quarantine. He's not been back to school since school started. He was the sickest of all in our family. My husband tested positive before anybody else did. Then my daughter tested positive. My husband had no symptoms. My daughter did. My son was the sickest of all of them. He was the one with the negative test amongst all the players and coaches and whatnot that were in the process of transmission. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's random. It's you don't know exactly how it's going to come and all of that. But I feel like as a board, as we've been working with this for the last 2 years, we've made good decisions. We've put things in place, but it seems like there's got to be a point in time where we move forward and we continue to, I feel like we're retreating and we're not fighting through what's happening, because we can't stop what's going on. Life has to continue, and the starting and stopping and the pulling kids in and out, I think is extremely disruptive and not a good move.
I have to agree. I think it's more disruptive for the parents and the students back and forth, back and forth. And I understand, we're coming at this as a temporary couple of weeks. The metrics from up north overseas show 2 weeks and we'll hit our peak. I just, at what point are we going to look at this? It's a virus. Everybody's going to get it. Some people are going to get it worse than others, and move forward. We have to keep moving forward. We're going to probably end up having to live with COVID just like we do the flu, and getting vaccinations every year, if that's your choice. We have to at some point. We just took essentially 9 days off of school and our numbers are still increasing. We take another 7 days and our numbers increase. So what good is going remote when we have no control over the transmission in the community, and just putting our kids at risk of not learning as well as they do in person? And I understand some kids are fearful. Everybody's got a fear point within them, and I get that. But we do have to move forward.
Well, and it says that in our mission statement. One part is no unity, no progress. So if we don't stand together, we don't move forward. And I think this is a place and time that we need to stand together and move forward.
I'm afraid of the message that it sends our children when we run and hide when something's going on. We run home and we mask up and we stay away and all that. We can send people to the moon, but we can't get past the virus. I mean, think about world wars. School doesn't stop. I mean, things have to move forward and continue. And I don't like the idea of retreating. We've taken very careful, measured steps moving forward, and I think we should still continue to move forward and not retreat.
I think another thing that we do have to consider, and I appreciate all the board member honesty and stepping up regarding the students, but we have to remember our staff too. And when we have almost half of our staff down, how can we continue to do valued learning and instruction when we have substitutes, or we have people that are just watching classes to have them in school? So that is another big piece we have to consider, is when our staff is taking a big hit from this virus as well. If we have sick, quarantine staff members not being able to do the instruction, they're still not getting the same experience, the same instruction as if they were in school. So we just need to consider all the perspectives as well.
Ms. June, if you don't mind, I'd like to add as well that we could potentially see more clusters with the more movement throughout the school. And that could happen, outside of the community and then bringing it in. But I just want to make sure that everyone keeps that in mind, that you can have several clusters going on in separate settings.
Thank you, Ms. Cox. Further comments, discussion? Okay, the first motion, need somebody to make a motion for the week of January 24th through the 28th to have remote instruction for the middle and high school students. All those in favor? All those opposed? Ms.
Opposed.
Saunders, Mr. Huffines,
Opposed.
Ms. Merrill,
Hackney.
Mr. Hackney, Ms. Foster.
I'll support the Health and Wellness Committee at this time.
Thank you. Please make note the Board of Directors has opposed the January 24th through the 28th remote learning. Teachers and students will be expected to be on campus next week. The second vote is the athletics will only resume for varsity basketball teams. Middle school will not be participating in events next week, is the recommendation. All those in favor of varsity only with the mitigations outlined in the recommendation document? All those for? Mr. Hackney?
Yes.
Opposed?
Ms. Foster?
Yes.
Okay. All those opposed? I got Mr. Hackney, Ms. Saunders, Mr. Huffines, and Ms. Murrell. Ms. Veraken, please make note that the board is not approving either recommendation from the Health and Wellness Committee. At this time, we have no further items on our agenda. Do I have a vote or a motion for adjournment? Mr. Huffines, second. Ms. Murrell, all those in favor? Mr. Huffines, Ms. Saunders, Ms. Murrell, Ms. Foster,
Yes.
Mr. Hackney,
Yes.
Ms. Jackson, we have now adjourned at 4:53 on January 21st, 2022.